Bakemonogatari's Nadeko Snake is the fourth arc in the Monogatari series, which introduces us all to Sengoku Nadeko, the snake girl who victimises herself so much she kinda ceases to be a victim, but before all that, she's just a simple girl who is bound up in snakes. And judging by a poll I posted on this channel, this is not everyone's favourite arc. But still, I feel there is a lot of depth people miss in this arc, which I will hopefully convince you of today. So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the fourth video in the Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Bakemonogatari's Nadeko Snake. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much such a small action can do for this channel. And if you want to support this channel even further, then perhaps check out my Patreon. Anyway, on with the video. Nadeko Snake is an arc about Sengoku Nadeko, the first true victim in the Monogatari series. This arc starts with Aragi and Kanbaru climbing the steps of North Shirohebe Shrine to run a little errand for Oshino. In the novel, we get a long fun conversation of Kanbaru and Aragi discussing various things, such as the 13th zodiac sign, but in the anime this is trimmed down to feature only the most key of events. The big one being the pair passing Sengoku as she runs down the steps. She is running away from the aftermath she left at the shrine. She's making a quick escape so her handiwork isn't seen because, like with her love for Aragi and her body, she is once again embarrassed. What she did in the shrine becomes clear to Aragi and Kanbaru shortly after they make it to the top of the mountain. Snakes cut up and pinned to the tree by awls, dozens and dozens of corpses litter the shrine, and as Aragi works out, this is the handiwork of Sengoku. Following her after seeing her in the bookstore, Aragi catches her in the act, bringing her back to his place so they can work out what's going on. Meme reenactment commences, and we learn that Sengoku has been bound by an oddity, a Jaganawara. It's a snake oddity that was unleashed upon her by a curse made by her friend after the boys she liked confessed to Sengoku, and Sengoku rejected them. In retaliation, this friend brought a curse charm of Kaiki, using it to curse Sengoku. Now at the time we don't know that the man to sell these charms is Kaiki, but in retrospect it makes a lot of sense. After all, the charms don't really work, they are a sham. It's only because Sengoku tried to remove it that the curse went off to begin with. And also, speaking of Kaiki, the reason the snakes in this part are white is because white snakes in Japanese culture represent money and fortune. And well, since Kaiki sold these snakes summoning curses for money and to grow his own fortune, the symbolism checks out. White snakes also represent good fortune, with it being said seeing a white snake is an extremely lucky omen. This may also apply to Sengoku, as although being cursed by this snake may appear on the surface to be a bad omen, it was actually the excuse Sengoku needed to once again pursue Aragi, making it to her actually good luck. This could mirror her overall character, playing the victim to her own gain, like how she gained a good thing out of this curse. After an uncomfortable scene of Sengoku in Nothing But Bloomers, Aragi consults Oshino and is given a charm that in theory should rid Sengoku of the snake. However, in reality it does not, because unknown to everyone is that there was not one snake, but two. And whereas the first snake set on her by her friend just constricted her and caused her pain, a representation of her friend's anger and envy, the second snake set on her by the boy she rejected began to sexually assault her, violating her in a way that represents not only the boy's anger at being rejected, but the lust he feels for her as well. Aragi pulls off the snake, fighting it himself, and just getting made an absolute fool of. The fact Aragi is the one to pull off this lust-fueled snake is symbolic of Aragi trying to preserve her innocence. He sees her as nothing but a child, looking away from all the sexual and implicit actions she makes towards him later in the series. He doesn't want to see her as anything but his little sister's friend, as a little sister, and so he pulls off the snake of lust to stop his image of her being ripped apart. Of course he also wanted to save her, but on a deeper level he just didn't want to see her sexualized, something which may have been foreshadowed when he is conflicted on whether to say she turned him on or not. The snake in the end gets away, going back to the boy who unleashed it on the world to begin with, in a way bringing the hate full circle. However, Aragi, by trying to stop it, was interrupting that circle, as Kanbaru says to him he shouldn't forget who really needs saving. Aragi risked his own life to stop a boy who almost killed his friends. In some ways it's commendable, but in others it's just plain foolish. It's his hero complex in full swing again, or more cynically his lack of any self-worth rearing its ugly head. The arc ends with Sengoku thanking Aragi for saving her, even though in his own mind, he failed. Quite ironic, since this is the only time in Bakemonogatari where the person he is trying to save actually needs saving. But we will dive a bit deeper into the many flaws of Aragi in a bit. First though, we need to discuss the meme glory that is. Rene circulation is by far the most well known and recognisable part of Monogatari. which is why such an egregious English version exists. But even if it's passed off by most as just a fun anime song with cute visuals, I, as always, believe there is a lot of deep symbolism within this opening, which we will now explore. The opening starts with Sengoku looking at the camera from various positions, almost as if she is asking for attention, most likely from Araragi. As you will soon notice, a lot of the stuff in this arc revolves around Araragi. A classic Pocky snap follows, which may be a reference to what would happen if the snake had succeeded, or maybe it's foreshadowing for a snap in Otaru Monogatari, or it's just a fun snap, who knows. We then see Sengoku walking with ripples appearing every time she steps, and although not yet relevant, keep these ripples in mind as they will soon become very symbolic. And by soon I mean the next shot, as we see Araragi and Sengoku walking in opposite directions. Araragi is darker, almost shaded, as he is no longer close to Sengoku. Ever since Skihi and Sengoku went to different schools, Sengoku has no longer been able to be close to Araragi. The ripples under their feet then represent their effects on one another. Sengoku's ripples don't reach him as she has no effect on his life, to the point he doesn't even remember her name when he first sees her. But his touch her, because even if he is far away from her, he still affects her. She is in love with him, and that love affects every aspect of her life. I mean, it's the love that made her reject the boy and made the events of the arc occur to begin with. So in that sense, you could also say that the ripples represent the rippling effect of your actions and their consequences. She looks at him while he walks away, as once again she loves him and wants to be with him, but he doesn't remember her or think about her, hence why he doesn't look at her back. The visuals saying like and love are quite self-explanatory. It's Sengoku questioning her own feelings for Araragi, then some classic foreshadowing of her dream to be a mangaka, the fact she is seen doing it day and night being a testament to its importance to her, as once again it is her dream. And although it might be a reach, maybe the fact she's doing it at night when we dream is another emphasis on this being her dream. Next are some visuals of her falling, possibly because she has fallen in love, or because she is being dragged down by her feelings. We get another scene of her and Araragi walking, but this time she's walking towards him rather than past him. If the before scene references them passing at the start of the arc and the distance between them, then this time it shows the events of the arc with her physically getting closer to him as a metaphor for her once again pursuing him. However, he still doesn't look at her, as he is unable to accept her feelings since he still just sees her as a little sister. The height difference is really played up in this scene too, which I believe emphasises this point. Many scenes of her smiling follow, which, if the opening is concurrent with the events of the arc, should reference how she now has reconnected with him, and hence she is happy because she is once again with her Kayomi Oni-chan. Her praying is of specific note, as not only might it reference her becoming a god later on, but also how the events of the arc are something she prayed for, a good omen rather than a bad one, as I previously explained. It zooms out to show multiple Sengokus, which possibly could mean she prayed for such a thing to happen again and again, or a hint towards her personality switches later in the series. I really ain't that sure. And finally we get a very sus smile, since now she has reconnected with Araragi, she can try to make her move. Another thing to note is the frequent use of shadows throughout this opening, which may represent her shadow, in other words her other side, something which again rears its ugly head in Otaru Monogatari. Much like with Ambivalent World, I think the colours in this opening are also very purposeful. The pastel colours really to me give off an innocent and childish vibe, perfect for Sengoku, who not only plays the role of the innocent child, but is seen as one by Araragi. The specific uses of greens and pinks may also play into this, green being a synonym for young or naive, and the pink might just be to represent her love, with pink being chosen over red, as it's a more childish love. The lyrics and overall delivery by Hanazawa Kana is really quite special. Sengoku sounds doubtful at the start of the opening, as if she is wavering over her feelings to Araragi, and this is followed by the fast-paced, almost soft rapping, which may represent her anxiety, with her thoughts jumping around in her head. The lyrics themselves tell of Sengoku being in love with Araragi, how she doesn't want to mess things up with words and instead it's fine just loving him from afar, which as we learn in Otaru Monogatari is a big flaw of hers, that she treats his love as a comfort for her with no intention of actually acting on it. We do have her question this though, as well Sengoku's thoughts are overall a mess. The Fuwa chorus really plays on the cute image that Sengoku is trying to project. She's a fan of shoujo manga after all and prefers fictional romances to the real kind. She likes them all Fuwa. It's why she calls herself an old-fashioned girl. To really back up my point on her praying to God for this to happen, she says thank you to God as even with her wretched fate, she got this chance meeting with Araragi. However, she is not satisfied with just a chance meeting, she wants more, which is why she says she wants him to watch her forever. As Sengoku, remember, wants attention, but also she doesn't want Araragi to love anyone but her, even if she never plans to actually be with him. She wants the comforts of loving him and him being there to be loved by her, but that's all she wants. The overall opening is just cute and wholesome, which makes it such a brilliant representation of Sengoku's character. As well, what does she do? She acts the part of the cute girl. She acts in a way people expect of her, just to buy the book's cutesy girl. Hence why this opening sticks out like a sore thumb in bakemonogatari and feels like it's fit more in some rom-com, as this is the image that she presents, rather than her true self, which of course we later see in Moso Express. Another thing to note is that when we see Sengoku drawing manga in the opening, she is drawn in her usual colour scheme, whereas for the rest of the opening we see her in her pink and green colour scheme. This obviously is a representation of her true self, the one who is content drawing manga, and the image she's playing, the cutesy girl. The fact this opening is all about her love for Aragi is even more impactful now, since as we learn she just uses her love for Aragi as a tool, as a comfort. They aren't her true feelings, hence why they exist as part of this opening, which explores not who Sengoku is, but who she pretends to be. Jizo statues appear at the start of the arc. You might think this is just a random bit of background detail, but let me tell you, the symbolism around these humble statues, it runs deep, as these are statues of Jizo, a deity of children. Now I'm sure the relation between the child god and Sengoku the child, who ends up becoming a child god, is very apparent, but there's a bit more to it than just that. Jizo, you see, is also known as Bound Jizo, and that comes from a story around Jizo statues. To briefly summarise, in a village a piece of cloth was stolen, the culprit could not be determined, so a Jizo statue was bound and brought to court for neglecting its duties, since Jizo is also a god of protecting from thieves. The townspeople laughed at this, so the judge, angered, forced a tax on them all. However, the poor townspeople had no money to give and instead gifted cloth, including the thief who outs himself by giving up a part of the cloth he stole, allowing Jizo to be freed from the bindings as the wish of justice had been granted. The message of the story being that even when bound, Jizo still grants the judge's wish. The wish came true, with the same person to tie the binding rope being the one to untie it, which can be further interpreted to mean that wishes can only be granted by your own actions. A sentiment which is incredibly relevant to Monogatari as a series, as this is basically just another way of saying you can only save yourself all on your own. And on the flip side, a wish ungranted will remain as a binding. And well, I think you might now be starting to see the connection. As what does the Jaganewara do to Sengoku? It binds her. And why? Because the boy who liked her's wish never came true. Because he was rejected, his wish was not granted, and so the snake represents the bindings which cannot be undone. I mean, the name Jaganewara literally means snake cutting rope. Another aspect of Jizo statues is once again in their relation to children. Jizos are often seen alongside roads as they guide lost souls. And well, in terms of Buddhist beliefs, a child's soul without proper time to gain good karma must be judged by the river of souls, exactly what we see happen to Hajakuji in Owari Monogatari, with the one to help these children being Jizo. As these kids without time to gain good karma are stuck in limbo, they are victims of an early death. Much like how Sengoku is a victim of curses, something outside of her control. She needs saving like a child in hell, she needs to be saved by Jizo, but at the same time she is bound by the wishes of others, aka the Jaganewara, again like Jizo. Very interesting stuff, I must admit, and full credit to Josh Dunham from WaveMotionCanon.com for pointing out this Jizo connection in his own Nadeko Snake analysis, which I will link below as it's a good read and more thoroughly explores the Jizo connections around Sengoku. As already mentioned back in my Hitaki Crab analysis, fanservice is more than just fanservice when it comes to Monogatari, and such a statement could not be any truer than when we look at this arc, as Nadeko Snake has two very clear fanservice scenes which hold immense symbolic weight. First is the scene of Sengoku undressing in Aragi's bedroom. This whole scene is very uncomfortable to watch, at least to me it is, and I think that's kind of the point, as we feel exactly what Sengoku feels, and that then acts as the necessary setup for Sengoku to say, Nadeko! Nadeko! This is how Sengoku sees herself. She hates her body. And well, what did the scene prior do? It sexualized her body. Sengoku didn't want to be sexualized by that boy, and we as the viewers now understand why, because the show forces us to do it ourselves, and then shows us Sengoku's reaction to it. It may be a bit of a questionable way to get the message across, but this scene undoubtedly gets across the pain Sengoku feels. And something that makes it all the more painful is how Aragi, the one person Sengoku does want to see her body, doesn't sexualize her in his mind. Her body then in her mind is a failure, only able to force the scorn of others onto her and not even able to catch the eye of the boy she likes. The other fanservice scene is when she's ravaged by a snake, in what to me is less a sexual scene and more a horrific scene. Sure, the acts are sexual in nature, but look at Sengoku's expression, her movements. These are scenes of not fan service, but of horror. As that is what this is to Sengoku. She hates the feelings of the boy. The snake is a physical representation of his lust. This scene visualizes the fears Sengoku has, shows us why she hates her body. Because this is what a boy wanted to do to her. These scenes on paper are erotic and sexual, but in execution are uncomfortable, depressing and horrific. And those words weirdly enough also describe Sengoku as a whole. This scene then, much like the toothbrush scene in Analyse Monogatari, shows how brilliant the direction of Monogatari is with portraying something that inherently is not sexual and sexual, but then completely twisting the meaning to make them sexual and horrific. So yes, I agree that these scenes may cross the line for some, are gross and make you uncomfortable, but there is still artistic value to them. However, that all said, if you personally are disgusted by these scenes, if they make you feel uncomfortable, then that's completely fine, and the arguments that there is artistic merits to them or that there is symbolism by no means lessen your personal feelings on the matter. Just because something's art does not mean you have to like it, just because there is intent behind it doesn't mean you can't feel uncomfortable. In a series like Monogatari, where questionable fan service is so prevalent, I just feel such a stance should be made very clear, and at no point should you make fun of or ridicule someone who feels uncomfortable with certain scenes in this series, as that's just not cool, guys. Sengoku, as already said, is a victim. Her oddity issue was not the result of her own actions. She didn't ask a crab for help or wish on a monkey's paw. She rejected the boy she didn't like and then was cursed by both the boy and her best friend. And although the technical reason is Araragi did Oshino a favour already, it must be emphasised how Sengoku was not charged a fee by Oshino for his work. Not like Senjigahara or Araragi, because unlike them who he helped solve their own issues, Sengoku was purely a victim. Of course, in later parts of the series we start to understand how she plays the role of a victim to the point she becomes one, and in such a way did cause this problem for herself, but in the context of Nadeko Snake as an individual arc, she is without a doubt a victim. Of course, I can't really expound on this more without leaving the confines of this arc, so all I'll say for now is that Sengoku is both a victim and a perpetrator, but being one does not excuse becoming the other. Up until this arc, Araragi has been very successful in resolving the issues of the girls he's helped. Senjigahara got her weight back, Hachikaji made it home, and the devil left Kanbaru's arm, with the only person being hurt in the process being Araragi himself. However, this arc is different. One of the snakes got away, going back to latch onto the person who first summoned it, and as we see in Koi Monogatari, a whole 4 months later in the timeline, that snake is still attached to the boy. Not everyone got out of this arc fine and dandy. Sengoku was saved, but another victim suffered in her place, something which makes Araragi angry, but as Kanbaru reminds him, he shouldn't forget who he's trying to save. As I harp on about quite a bit in my Araragi character analysis, Araragi plays the hero. He does so because of his own lack of any self-worth. He acts out his role in an attempt to make his life have some worth. Risking his own life to save another's is the best way he knows how to make his own life worth something. Add on the fact that he can self-punish by putting his own body in harm's way, and a picture of a very unhealthy set of behaviours sets in. It's this arc though that really hammers it all home, but although yes, Kanbaru was trying to kill him in the previous arc and he still wanted to save her, in this arc he's trying to save some guy he's never met who almost caused the death of his friend. Either Araragi is the world's purest altruist, or man just wants an excuse to go get himself all ripped up by a snake. This arc is one of the first glimpses of how deep Araragi's hero complex runs, something which will get expanded on a lot as the series goes on, especially in relation to Sengoku, the girl playing the victim to him, the man playing the hero. So then, what is Sengoku's lesson? What does she as a character take away from this experience? Well, not much, and that's again the point. She is a victim. This isn't a self-inflicted problem she has to learn from, but even so there is still a lesson for her to take on board. And that lesson, at least in my opinion, is that she entrusts her problems to others, that she doesn't need to deal with them herself. When she tried to break the curse, she instead just made it worse. And this, as we see in later parts, is a constant of her character. She makes things worse for herself, she plays the victim to the point she becomes one, she is her own worst enemy. The reason she doesn't grow is because of herself, as is the reason she doesn't pursue her dreams, or the reason she doesn't act as who she really is. It's easier to not do anything, conform to what people think of you and let others sort out your problems for you. By being saved by Araragi, she learned that she can just wait to be saved and that she was right to rely on him. She used him to save herself from that confession, and now he came and saved her from the aftermath too. His intervention reinforced her belief that she can just rely on others to maintain the status quo, that she doesn't need to change. Her internalized beliefs are given credence in this arc. And so her love for Araragi deepens, her reliance on him, as an unrequited love to make her happy, as a person she likes to avoid being asked out, as a hero to save her when she is in danger. However, this is just a coping mechanism. It's not a positive lesson she learns in this arc. Instead, all she learns is that her flawed beliefs, her flawed coping mechanism, could work, causing her to resist change, resist reality, leading to her snapping in Atari Monogatari. As Kaiki comes to say, Araragi cannot help Sengoku in the slightest, and this arc says that clear as day. Nadeko Snake is rather unanimously considered the worst arc in Bakemonogatari, and although I'd say it's my least favourite of the 5, that isn't to say it is bad by any means. It's unique in a lot of ways, changing up Bakemonogatari's established formula in subtle ways, as well as showing us Araragi's hero complex in full display, something that becomes central to his character development in later parts. It's almost ironic in the way that this arc, which is considered to be one of the worst arcs in the series, is the one that introduced so many people to the series. I mean, I'll hold my hands up and say, it was Rene Circulation that made me watch the series for the first time. I just wanted to see what anime that meme song came from. So in that sense I owe a lot to this arc, as without it I may still not have stumbled upon this anime yet, and what a dark timeline that would be. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting this channel, then consider pledging to my Patreon, where for as little as £2.75 a month, you can get your name at the end of the video, like Ikari Desu, 7SO, Ringjack9696, Dewey, and General Tonyos. So with all that said and done, I've been SephTheSin, the Deadly Sin of Geek, and I'm signing out. Stay safe, everyone.